Good afternoon. I'm Lori Weinstein, CEO of Jewish Women International, and I've been working on the issue of domestic abuse for most of my professional life. However, this is my first Google chat, and I'm so excited that we're getting started with a discussion with such key people on the issue of ending violence against women and girls, and particularly the intersection of domestic abuse and gun violence. For more than 2 decades, JWI has created programs for women and girls, teens and college students, and most recently for boys and men about the dangers of domestic and sexual violence and the urgent need to create a culture that encourages and teaches healthy relationships, has rigorous consequences for abusers, and encourages everyone to stand up and be counted on this important issue. For JWI, our defining moment, our own tipping point, as you will, came in 1988 when a distinguished member of our organization, a scientist with 2 small children, was gunned down in the parking lot by her estranged husband. Her violent death was a tragedy beyond words, and it caused our organization to pivot, issuing a clarion call to the more than 50,000 donors, members, and supporters to fill the silent space on the issue of domestic abuse with education, awareness, and public outcry. 25 years later, the Violence Against Women Act has been passed and reauthorized 3 times, and events of recent months, particularly in professional sports, have led to an impassioned and elevated outcry, giving us hope that we may be turning a corner. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and today my esteemed colleagues and I will tackle the most lethal topic within the frame of domestic and sexual violence, gun violence. Just a few statistics to ground today's conversation. More than half of women murdered with guns in the United States are killed by intimate partners. The presence of a gun in a home where there is domestic violence, in fact, increases lethality by more than 500%. And finally, a statistic that even I find staggering is the fact that from 2001 to 2012, more women were killed in the United States by an intimate partner with a gun, 6,412, than the combined total of all U.S. casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's a sobering statistic. Gabby Giffords' courage and bravery is evident to all of us, but her recent book, Enough, is a book that should be read by every American who cares about gun ownership, gun safety, and gun violence. It illuminates a sensible approach to gun safety and illuminates a very important and practical approach on an issue that has been over-politicized, creating a political din that does not allow for the respected voices of moderation to identify the sensible path for moving forward. I hope that many of you on this call have read Gabby's book, and I encourage everyone to read this tremendous and really truly inspiring book. And I'm so glad that today's conversation includes some of the best and brightest voices on this difficult issue, all here to discuss Gabby and Mark's book and the topic of guns and domestic abuse. Our speakers are wonderful colleagues and great examples of the tremendous work that's being done in the field. Our first speaker will be Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. He will be followed by Peter Ambler, who is the Director of Strategy for Americans for Responsible Solutions. Following Peter will be Katie Ray Jones, who's the CEO of the National Domestic Abuse Hotline. And finally, Lucy McBath, who is a spokesperson for Moms Demand Action. I want to take a minute just to review the format for this Google Chat. After we hear from all our speakers, we'll have time to answer some questions. So please feel free to type your questions in the chat box to the right of your screen, and we'll be sure to try to answer all of them before our hour is up. We'll take as many questions as we possibly can. So first, without further ado, let me introduce Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, one of our major allies in Congress, not only on the issues of gun safety, but a true leader on all issues pertaining to women and girls. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you so much. I am so honored and grateful to be with you, and I want to thank JWI for giving me this opportunity to talk to all who have committed to action on this profoundly important topic. I've seen firsthand its importance because I served as Attorney General of our state for 20 years, and the largest number of cases and lawyers involved in the Office of Attorney General was involving domestic abuse, neglect and abuse of children, and family violence, which causes so much in costs. And you've heard some of the statistics, but literally every 20 minutes a person is a victim of abuse or violence by an intimate partner, which means 10 million people a year and $8.3 billion every year in our country. So this problem has human dimensions and dollar dimensions that are gargantuan, and of course impacts on families and the cycle of violence that is perpetuated, because 75% of the men who commit domestic violence have seen or experienced it in their own homes. Breaking that cycle is a major challenge, and today domestic violence and abuse are inextricably linked to gun violence. In fact, they are two heads of the same monster, a fact brought home to me when I served as Attorney General and saw firsthand the carnage that results from the use of guns. Women are 5 times more likely to be killed in a case of domestic abuse when there's access to a gun. I have been committed, therefore, for a couple of decades to ending gun violence as well as domestic abuse. I helped to write the law in Connecticut that put Connecticut at the forefront of fighting gun violence and defended it in court when it was challenged a couple of decades ago. But my commitment on this issue, I think, was deepened by being at Newtown, Connecticut in the wake of the massacre there, the horrific, unspeakable, unimaginable massacre of 20 beautiful children and 6th grade educators. I was at the firehouse when those moms and dads learned that their children would not be coming home that night and saw the cries and sounds and faces of grief and pain, and in subsequent weeks and months worked with those families in trying to pass through the Congress a common sense, sensible set of measures like background checks, universally applied, or a ban on straw purchases and illegal trafficking of stolen guns, as well as others, and a measure on school safety and a mental health initiative. These kinds of common sense measures are supported by 90% of the American people, the majority of gun owners, perhaps even the majority of NRA members, and yet they failed to gain the 60 votes we needed. They got a majority, 55 votes, were prepared to go for it. But we are far from going away, determined that we will pursue that kind of measure, whether this session or the next, because it will make America safer and better, and all the passion, all the great grief and pain that we felt in the wake of Newtown will be channeled toward that effort to prevent this kind of senseless, brutal mass massacre, but also the one-by-one cases of domestic violence that occur behind closed doors, in the dark. Unlike the Ray Rice example, which was the exception that proved the rule, there are almost never videos of domestic violence, and the evidence of it is in the scars and the marks and the deaths that occur. So we need to recommit and reinvigorate ourselves as a nation, as advocates, to make sure that gun violence and domestic violence are ended, and the two are inextricably linked, which is why I think the nation is ready right now for a measure that I propose after another tragic instance in Connecticut. Lori Jackson, a woman estranged from her husband, separated from him, who told that man that she was going to seek a divorce. She left him to live with her parents after he threatened her. In fact, she sought and received a protective order. It was a temporary protective order, and therefore it had no requirement that he surrender his weapons. And in fact, literally the day before that temporary order was to become a permanent court order, he gunned her down in her home in Oxford, killing her, severely wounding her mother, while her two infant children slept nearby. The Lori Jackson Domestic Violence Survivor Protection Act would compel a ban on possession and purchase of guns by anyone under a protective order, whether permanent or temporary. It would therefore close a loophole that now exists in our law. I hope it will have the kind of bipartisan support that this cause should have, because Lori Jackson is hardly alone. Jasmine Leonard also had a temporary protection order against her husband. She died after her husband shot her. China Joy Young celebrated her 18th birthday just days before she was shot and killed by her estranged boyfriend, despite the order that she had against him. She was 3 months pregnant. Barbara Diane Dye was granted a temporary order, and that led to safety in Texas. She returned only for the hearing on the permanent restraining order, and that's when her husband cornered her in a bank parking lot and shot her repeatedly and killed her. These tragedies are repeated literally day in and day out in our great country, and we are the greatest and strongest country in the history of the world. We can do better, and the fight against domestic violence really requires a fight against gun violence as well. I conclude on this note. Gabby Giffords recently visited Connecticut. She came to a school in West Hartford. She was moving in her call for our continuing the battle against gun violence and domestic violence. In fact, the occasion was to show the connection and also make sure that women are aware of that connection, are engaged in this fight, and are committed to these twin evils linked together, domestic violence and gun violence. I'm very proud to be with JWI today and all of my distinguished colleagues, and I thank them for joining us as well. Thank you very much.
Senator Blumenthal, thank you so much for being a part of today's conversation and for lending your wisdom and advice, not just to our talk today, but also really to being a champion for this issue in Congress to ensure that sensible gun laws are enacted that do very basic things like close the loop protective orders. Your reminder that, as well as the stories, the very poignant stories you told of women in Connecticut, recent stories that inspire the legislative initiatives that you're standing behind, remind us all that these horrible cases really are all around us, and the time to move is now. Thank you again so much for being a part of today's conversation and for reminding us also of the ongoing work that Gabby is doing in states all over the country. I now have the of introducing the Director of Strategy for Americans for Responsible Solutions, the organization that was established by Gabby Giffords and her husband, Mark Kelly. Peter Ambler is joining us today, and we are delighted to have him with us. So, Peter, please.
Well, thank you very much. My internet came back on just in time to catch your prompt. It's a real honor to be representing Congresswoman Giffords and her husband, Mark Kelly, with an organization that is so important to her. She's honored to receive an award from you very soon, and just feels so special to be able to connect with you and all your members. Of course, really excited to be discussing Gabby and Mark's new book, Enough, which sort of chronicles their thinking about the issue of gun violence and their fight to prevent it. Something that I sort of want to touch on quickly at the top is different point of view. Unlike people in other parts of the country, living in Tucson, Arizona, Mark having lived for decades in Houston, Texas, they look at gun ownership as part and parcel of daily right, and they are 100% big believers in the Second Amendment. But after experiencing, obviously, we have to do something. We are in unique positions as one being survivors of gun violence, but also being people who can put ourselves in the shoes of gun owning America. And so when we come at the issue of gun violence prevention, we come at it not as a group that disapproves of the role of guns in society, but as a group that wants to enact some simple, common sense laws that Democrats, Republicans, people across the political spectrum can agree on to reduce gun violence in America. Nowhere is that problem and that sort of issue more illuminated than in the sort of topic of conversation here today, which is gun violence against women, the nexus of guns and domestic abuse. Gun violence against men and gun violence against women, of course, differs in a pretty fundamental way. Men tend to be murdered by people they do not know, while women tend to be murdered by people that they do know. Where is violence occurring? It's occurring tragically in the home. In fact, the most dangerous place for American women is in their own homes. It's not only a domestic violence issue, it's not just a violence against women issue, it's a families issue. And we see that 72% of all murder-suicides involve an intimate partner, and that the #1 cause of death for pregnant women is murder. So what is the role of guns in this public safety problem? You know that when an abuser dies, crime is more likely to result in death than assault with other weapons or with bodies. And that's why the U.S. tragically has a death rate among women that is 11 times the average of our peers, other democratic developed countries. So that's why ARS, Gabby, and Mark have over the past few months spent so much time talking about this critical nexus of gun violence and violence against women. Because we know that, one, like Senator Blumenthal said, domestic violence is something that permeates generations and that ripples into the lives of children and their children and that, and also that guns are the primary driver of deadliness of mortality in domestic violence. That's why we're out talking about closing background check loopholes so that domestic abusers don't get access to firearms. That's why we're working with Senator Blumenthal and other members of the Senate to prevent stalkers from getting guns, to prevent dating abusers from getting guns. In fact, we are just, you see behind me, we have a big map of the country up here at ARS, and we have that up because Gabby just went on a 9-state, 9-day protect all women's tour of the country, where from Maine to Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Iowa, Minnesota, Arizona, Oregon, Washington State, we sat down with the people on the front line, with the women who are leading our police departments, who are investigating domestic violence crimes, with advocates who are listening to stories of domestic violence victims and helping to get out of these terrible crisis situations every day. We spend a lot of time listening, and we are going to take their voices, their message back to the state legislatures, to the United States Congress, to make sure that, one, people know, like Senator Blumenthal said, that when you cannot be good on domestic violence, but bad on gun violence prevention. So many people would like to slice and dice the issues and the electorate like that, to position themselves politically, but Gabby wants the country to come together, gun owners, non-gun owners, Democrats, Republicans alike, send a clear message that violence against women and gun violence are inextricably linked. You can't separate the two, and that they are two heads of the same beast. Love to stay on, answer more questions about Gabby's work, about our priorities in Congress and the state legislature, and any questions that y'all have about the book, which I've read maybe 10 or 15 times.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for being such a great innovator and a wonderful partner in this work. Before we turn to our next speaker, I just want to mention one thing. In the right-hand corner of your screen is a box that you can click on and go through to add your questions to the upcoming conversation that we'll have after everyone is done speaking. So I encourage everyone, as you start to think of questions that are related to this topic, to go ahead and click that button, type in your question, we'll have a chance to review it, and then come back to the conversation. I would now like to introduce Katie Ray Jones, who is the CEO of the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and is going to share some of her stories, some very personal stories from the hotline, reflected in the calls that they receive every day that are related to gun violence. Katie?
I have the extreme honor as serving as CEO of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The National Domestic Violence Hotline was established in 1994 as part of the Violence Against Women Act and took our first call in 1996. Since that time, we have answered nearly 3.5 million calls from victims and survivors of domestic violence, as well as their family and friends. And we provide those services 24/7, not only today via the phone, but also via chat as well. So we're very busy hotline, as you can imagine, and even more so these days given recent activity with the Ray Rice video and the added media attention to the issue of domestic violence. For those of you who've been working in the field, I think you're all too aware of how often firearms plays a role in relationships, and we've had that sense for a long time here at the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And it was recently, earlier this year, that one of our colleagues, who many of you may know, Roberta Valente, who is a firearms expert when discussing policy related to firearms and domestic violence incidences, really developed some questions to help us think critically about the experiences our callers and chatters were experiencing regarding guns and their relationships. Earlier this year, we conducted over an 8-week period a survey, what we call a focus survey, and provide an opportunity for those individuals who are reaching out to us via chat to answer a series of questions regarding how firearms may be playing a role in their relationship. During this 8-week period, we had over 5,000 individuals who participated. And even for us, in the stories that we hear, and we knew the prevalence of firearms, we were quite dismayed and shocked at the results. And some of them, reading the narrative that some women left in the comment section, still gives me goosebumps today and brings tears to my eyes. So I may get a little emotional as I share some of this data. 16% of the women out of the 5,000 people who reported the survey indicated that their partner had access to a gun. And 10% of those women had indicated that their partner had fired the firearm during an argument in their home. We heard many stories from women family members, children even, who talked about partners threatening to kill their family, kill them, the child, kill their pets. And 67% of those participants indicated that they believed their partner was capable of killing them. Those are very chilling, I think, in this line of work, to know that there's so many individuals living in fear and feeling like they don't have access to resources to keep them safe in their own homes. And that's why I've been really grateful to be able to work alongside organizations such as Americans for Responsible Solutions, the Center for American Progress, and Everytown USA, who are taking the issue of gun control and really highlighting the intersection of domestic violence and why it's so important. I think what most amazed me from the survey, alongside the chilling statistics, was the number of women who actually indicated, and this was not a single story or a handful, it was a pattern, a trend amongst our survey respondents, who indicated that they had been raped by a firearm, that they would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of a safety on the firearm being taken off, being woken up in the middle of the night to a gun being held to their head, their partner cleaning a gun and staring at them the whole time, their children being talked to about how firearms would be used to hurt their mother and the child. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional. The extreme terror that so many people are living in, that feel so alone and isolated, which is why here at the National Domestic Violence Hotline, we're working really hard alongside JWI and the previous groups I mentioned to make sure that women, men, and children across the country have the rights they need to protect them in a time when terror is most present, when they're trying to leave a relationship, when they're trying to protect themselves and their family members. I know we've heard the Vice President say that one is too many, and I couldn't agree more. But when we know that there's thousands of women out there living in terror every single day, it really is an opportunity and the time for us to do the right thing and make sure that the protections exist. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions, and we can disperse the survey results to everyone participating. Thank you so much.
Katie, thank you so much. I'm sorry that we couldn't see you live, but your remarks absolutely spoke through everything and remind us that guns are weapons larger than even their ability to impact women through shooting, but rather they're a weapon of continual oppression and suppression, and can be used in terrible ways to continue to oppress the wives and girlfriends and others that are living in the presence of violence where a gun is in the home. So I thank you, and I now would like to introduce Lucy McBath from Moms Demand Action, a group of moms from every state across the country who are working to change the epidemic of gun violence that affects every community. Lucy, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I just want to, on behalf of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, thank JWI for giving us a chance to speak with you today, and we're just very honored to do so. Before I talk about our work on domestic violence, I would like to just take a moment to introduce myself and explain how I came to be on this call today. My name is Lucy McBath, and I serve Jordan Davis. And he's the young gentleman that was shot and killed at a gas station in Jacksonville, Florida. This happened on November 23rd, 2012. This is considered the loud music case. The boys were playing loud music in their car when they were shot at Michael Dunn. I'm also the national spokesperson for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and thank you so much for having me today. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America is a grassroots movement of American mothers. We're fighting for public safety measures that respect the Second Amendment rights and also protect people from gun violence. We campaign for new and stronger solutions to the lax gun laws in this country and the loopholes that jeopardize the safety of our communities, our families, and our children. And since our inception, after the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School, Moms Demand Action has established a chapter in every state across the United States. And along with Mayors Against Illegal Guns, which is Moms Demand Action and Mayors Against Illegal Guns, we're now under the umbrella organization of Everytown for Gun Safety. And we are the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country. We have more than 2 million members. Almost 2 years ago, I myself found myself on a path that I absolutely did not choose, fighting this battle that I really didn't begin at all. And now I'm actually learning to advocate to change dangerous gun laws, laws that I never even knew existed before the tragedy with my son. After my son Jordan was shot and killed in Jacksonville, Florida, I agonized over, the pain and the injustice of losing my son to gun violence, specifically just over loud music. I was extremely pained by something as simple as loud music. Lost my son over that. And so I began to really agonize over the expansive gun laws in this country that forego responsibility and respect and uphold allowing guns to fall into the wrong hands. I also found power through my pain. I started working with Moms Demand Action, and I have since found the strength and the motivation to do everything that I possibly can to ensure that no other mother, father, family member, friend has to experience the same kind of pain that I have. Due to the senseless gun violence that is rampant in our country today. Domestic violence victims and their families are also plagued by similar injustice and pain. And we know that there's a deadly relation between violence against women and guns in America. And our horrible, porous gun laws put women's lives at risk every single day. In fact, American women are 11 times more likely to be murdered with a gun than in other developed countries. More than half of the women murdered with guns in 2011, that's 53%, were killed by an intimate partner or family member. That makes the United States the most dangerous for women in the developed world when it comes to gun violence. This is absolutely unacceptable, and that's why Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America has made it our priority to pass legislation at the state and federal level to help keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and other dangerous individuals. In the last year, moms working alongside domestic violence survivors and prevention advocates, we've been hard to pass bills in 6 states that will keep guns out of the abuser's hands. These measures pass with bipartisan support and have been signed into law by governors of both parties, including both Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. For Mother's Day, we sent to Washington, D.C. to talk direct legislative to close loopholes in our current law, allow domestic abusers to get their hands on no fast. We want to see our lawmakers step up, and we want them to sign common sense bills like Senator Klobuchar's Protecting Domestic Violence and Stalking Victims Act, S 1290. This bill would close those loopholes in federal law that allows domestic abusers and stalkers to even get their hands on guns. So that we need to hold our elected officials accountable when they fail to do the right thing when it comes to protecting women and our families. That is why Moms Demand Action, we spend time in this election season, we're spending a great deal of time, over 1 million Americans to sign our pledge cards to be gun sense voters. Gun sense is the simple idea that we can be doing more to prevent gun violence in our country, and that we will only only vote for those leaders and laws that are working to prevent gun violence in our nation. Now, we're going to continue to work to change America's culture of gun violence, one family, one law, one company, and one election at a time. And Moms Demand Action will continue to use our voices, and we will speak very loudly, and our votes will find leaders and pass laws with gun sense, like expanding background checks for all gun sales to keep guns in the hands of criminals and domestic abusers. Now, as we move forward, Moms Demand Action, we're going to continue to work at the federal, the state, and local level to fix these lax gun laws. And for us, this issue is far from a partisan or only a partisan issue or only something just to focus on in October. It's about protecting what we cherish most. That's our family and our freedom to walk on the streets and live in our communities without being abused by gun use. And so on the federal level, our number one national policy priority remains pushing for background checks on all gun sales. We know that background checks are the single most effective way to prevent guns from getting into the hands of criminals and individuals that don't need to have them. In addition, we will continue to push for senators to co-sponsor Senator Klobuchar's bill and to see similar legislation proposed in the House as well. We will continue to work in key states to see domestic violence bills take center stage and to try to keep the momentum of 2014, keep that momentum going into 2015. We're going to work tirelessly gathering petitions, signers in Nevada to push for a ballot initiative that will expand the background system to cover all gun sales. Common sense measure that closes the loophole in Nevada that currently allows dangerous people like domestic abusers to get guns through unlicensed sellers. They get these guns without a background check. No questions asked at all. They're getting the guns this way. So moms will continue to bring from every corner of their communities. We want to stand strong together to ensure that gun violence prevention remains the forefront of our focus and the forefront of the focus of the United States. So pretty much from the PTA to the Senate floor, Moms Demand Action, we're very steadfast in our dedication to curbing the epidemic of gun violence that we have in this country. And as moms, we know that we have to do more to protect women and our families. And we're ready to win this fight. And we're so proud to be here, and we're so proud to work alongside so many steadfast partners in this work.
Lucia, you are the perfect person to wrap up our conversation, the first part of our conversation. I think you galvanized all of us with your spirited presentation that included something that was also so personal and that has actually fueled your leadership and your involvement in Moms Demand Action. And I thank you for sharing your story and for your tremendous leadership on this issue. I know with groups like Moms, and we will advance this issue further faster. The other thing I know, and what is so timely, is that we are 6 days away from the election. And for those of us who are joining us on this chat today, I can only use one word, and that is vote. Your vote matters. It's important. Wherever you are, please take the time to vote. And if you feel, as I do, and as all of us do here today, that we are talking about sensible changes that plug up loopholes, that take initiatives just one step further, and that address the issue of guns in the wrong hands of abusers, gun holders with criminal records, people with protective orders. It is very important that you make your voice heard at this very critical time. So please, everyone, get out and vote. Again, Lucy and Peter and Katie, thank you so much. Senator Blumenthal has left us, but we do have a few questions, and I'd like to turn to those questions now. The first question is a very basic one which came in, which is, how do you define a boyfriend or a dating partner? And I'll take that and just answer it quickly, and then we can move on. Really, a relationship is any sort of social relationship that has a romantic foundation to it. This relationship can be of any length of time, and it can be to anyone that you are currently, frequently, or have been in a relationship with. And I think that most broadly connects the dots of what constitutes a romantic relationship. The next question came to us. Somebody posted, the NRA is spending millions of dollars this campaign cycle to defeat candidates that support stricter gun laws. Do we actually have a chance to defeat the NRA? And Peter, maybe I'll turn that to you first to respond to that question. Peter, we're having a little trouble with your sound, I'm sure. Maybe, did you mute yourself? Okay, Peter, it appears that there's a mute on your voice. Can you hear me?
Oh, I hear. Okay, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so now start over.
Yes, we can absolutely defeat the NRA. In fact, in Washington State right now, we are poised to do just that. You have two questions on the ballot right now in the state of Washington. You have Initiative 594, which establishes universal background checks in that state, and you have Initiative 591, which actually rolls back Washington State's current background checks initiative. And polls show that we are on the brink of victory. Of course, it all depends on everybody who's watching right now from Washington State going out there and voting. But what's interesting there, Washington State, is you actually have the direct array listed as working $1,000. They've tried their hardest, but at the end of the day, when voters get to choose, when real people get to choose, we see that we can deliver the real meaningful defeats, and we can pass legislation that we're planning to do that next year in Nevada, like you just heard, and hopefully in other states as well. Across the map, obviously, come Tuesday, we're going to have, it's election day. There are going to be people who win, people who lose. Everybody is sort of out there promoting their favorite candidates. But the question of gun violence isn't necessarily going to be decisive where certain people are going to be. But where it is, where the background checks are on the ballot, I think we're close to victory, and that's what's most important. That's what we're going to win.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to answer the question?
Well, definitely. Definitely, I would say it was a long, long, hard process, but I definitely know what we know at Moms Demand Action is that any time you have to change the culture of a nation, it's many things that we've done, such as gay and lesbian rights, women, moms driving, all the tobacco industry. Anytime there has been a major shift or major move in the country to change a culture, it's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort, a lot of galvanizing organizations and people to come together, a coalition coming together to make the change. We know that it's going to happen just one person at a time as you change the mindset of each and every individual in the country. And the Progress will be slow. It will take a while, but we know that this is the right thing to do. Moms demand action. We know that we're on the right course. We know that the majority of the citizens in our nation want to feel safe and free from gun violence. So yes, it can be done, and it will be done.
The next question that came to us was, and it may be a little bit repetitive, is how will these laws actually make a difference? Katie, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this.
Sure. So I think what's really important for individuals to realize, and I think it's been educational even for me as we have been working alongside ARS, CAP, Everytown, Moms Demand Action, to really understand how some laws protect married couples but not necessarily dating individuals, how the most dangerous time when a woman leaves and she gets a temporary restraining order before that permanent order is granted. We know that there are women being killed because the husband may get kicked out of the house, but he gets to take his firearm with him. And we've heard many stories from women who are trying to do everything right. And I think some of the powerful testimony that we've heard, even from individuals who are NRA members, who've lost family members, during a time when their sister, their mother, their aunt was doing everything right, got the protective order, the temporary restraining order, she left the relationship, she was seeking services, and their partner was able to access a gun over the internet because there wasn't a background check. So these are all the loopholes that you've heard throughout today, that the laws that we can work to educate lawmakers, even our neighbors in our community, because they're voters and it's really important people are putting the right people in the seat. It's an opportunity for us to educate how challenging this is of an issue for women and men and children, and that we need to really work hard and advocate because our vote does matter, and we will not take no for an answer. We will keep working until the protections are there for everyone to close the loopholes.
That's a great synopsis. I would only, add for people who are really trying to develop a better understanding of of how we intend to plug up these loopholes is that we need to extend the same rights to women who are victims of domestic violence, to women who are experiencing dating violence, and women who are victims of stalking. And this is another place where we have where there are important loopholes that really have to be closed so that we can ensure that all women who are at risk or living in a relationship of existing or potential violence have those protections. Our very last question is, what can I do to help? And I think that's a perfect question truly to close on. And I think maybe we all have an answer. Some of those answers have been put forth in the last few minutes. We've talked about things like voting. We've talked about things like taking on some of the really personal issues that are easy fixes, closing loopholes, asking Congress to support legislation like Senator Blumenthal's that would close the gaps in the current law and ensure that victims of dating violence and stalking are protected from firearms violence. Signing the petition on our JWI website. Just go to jwi.org and please take a minute to sign our petition around ending gun violence. And then I know that all of our organizations are working very hard. We all have ideas on ways to help, and I just want to see if anyone wants to add anything else.
Lori, can I just close with one story about Gabby?
Sure.
Gabby likes to tell a story that when in the year 2000, she first decided to run for state legislature, the state house in Arizona. She was a young businesswoman in Tucson, selling tires out of her family's store. And she raised her hand and she said, I want to be part of this. I'm going to run for the state house. The very first person who who came and talked to her was the local NRA. And that's effectively what we're doing now, is creating that type of energy, enthusiasm, infrastructure on our side of the issue. So when, from the very beginning, people running for school board, when running for the state legislature, city council, and up to Congress, U.S. Senate, and United States President, that there are people reaching out to them early on, saying, I care about gun violence prevention. I'm going to vote on that. I'm going to be watching you, and I'm going to be voting you.
Great.
And I would just like to say that, you know, Moms Demand Action, we will continue definitely working with survivors of domestic violence. In fact, a lot of our spokespersons are survivors of domestic violence, so that makes them very viable, credible people that have a story to tell. Something as simple as just Shannon Watts, who is the founder of our organization, just after Sandy Hook, listening to what's been happening in the country. Something as simple as her just beginning a Facebook chat about gun violence in this country has really just evolved into something that is steamrolling and moving. And it only takes one person. It only takes one person just to stand up and say enough is enough. Our citizens deserve to be protected. And we know that Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, under Every Town for Gun Safety, that's exactly what we plan on doing. And we encourage anyone that'd like to join us, please do so.
Thanks, Lucy. So I want to thank everybody for such an inspiring and enlightening conversation. I want to swing back to where we started this call, and that was as both a celebration of Gabby and Mark's new book, Enough, which gives all of us both the story and the landscape for building our work further, for doing so much more to advance sensible gun legislation that protects women and girls, protects families, protects children in schools, protects our communities. This is our clarion call here at JWI. And I invite you to join with all of us as we go forward. And I thank the 3 or 4 of you who were part of such an illuminating conversation. And one I'll never forget because it was my first Google chat. So, thank you.
Mine too.
Great. Thank you. And we look forward to further opportunities to really address this issue and take it into the next congressional session. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal.